Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer, voice recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the Thursday edition by bi-weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only live stream Crafting the Deep, in which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Call from the Deep. If you're playing characters Gottwald, Max Saber, or Toro, this is not the right stream. Will be full of spoilers, but the rest of you are always welcome. We stream our D&D sessions live on YouTube every Friday. You can join our official Discord server with invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson for our campaign. We use Roll20 for streaming. I use OBS Studio. I keep debating whether I want to move ahead to the Styes or keep talking about the Sahuagin Stronghold, but I really do want to nail down this chase sequence specifically because it's going to be the biggest departure and different thing happening in this dungeon compared to the rest of what's going on. By the way, we are in the middle of a thunderstorm right now. It is very dark, rainy outside, thunder going crazy. Supposed to do this. Literally, it's 11 a.m. right now. It's been going on for about, I don't know, 45 minutes. It's supposed to keep doing this till like 9 p.m. at night or something, which is a big bummer. But I'm telling you this because if I suddenly get disconnected, it's safe to assume that we lost power. It does not happen very often here where I'm at. What happens more often is the power might flick, which is unfortunately just as brutal. So if it flickers, if I'm less than halfway through the stream, I will try to come back. If I'm more than halfway over the stream, I will probably just call it a wash at that point. But just kind of warning everybody that I am in the midst of a thunderstorm right now, and just in case I might lose power. All right, so we're looking at the first level, I think, now of the Sahuagin Stronghold, because level 2 is just about wrapped up. The only thing I could do down there is a patrol, although I'm almost tempted to have it be more cinematic versus a combat encounter. So like maybe even not even launching it until they get to near the stairs and then say, oh, but you see another like patrol coming at you from the side, and they're like, hey, there they are, and they haul ass, to where the players are almost like starting the chase sequence when they actually start the upper level versus having another fight down here. But we'll see how I'm feeling. I may want to just force another fight down here with a patrol. It feels not great to do that when the party's already been in a bunch of really big fights, and I know they've still got some big fights coming up, so I don't really feel the need to throw another patrol at them. The patrol, in other words, would be like a story patrol and not a combat patrol, whereas I'm telling the players, hey, you don't have to fight these guys, you can just haul ass and hurry up the stairs, and then we'll deal with them as they come, which I guess if I do it that way, then I will probably have to spawn at least like a Sahuagin or two, maybe during this battle here, which is the one in room 19, the hallway with all the prisoners shackled up in there, and just to try to create not the illusion, the very real fact that the party is starting to stir up the hornet's nest of the entire dungeon, so they've got reinforcements coming from below for sure. So we'll see how that goes. I may fudge some hit point. Ooh, that was big thunder. That one made me jump. Poor dogs are not happy right now. Ooh, that was a loud one. All right. Getting the edge of it, yeah. It's a big storm. We knew it was coming. We swam yesterday and had a good time yesterday. We got our concrete sealant in, so we got to move all our furniture out on our brand awesome spanking new patio, which was fantastic, and had an awesome outdoor day. And partially because we knew this day was coming, where it was like, oh, this is gonna suck. I did remember to send my oldest with an umbrella though when she went to school, so hopefully we don't lose power. So once they have this encounter, what I want to do then is have everybody hurry and then escape via a chase scene. Not escape the whole dungeon, but basically make it from room 19 to room 1 by traveling along this entire side of the corridor. But instead of just having them move their tokens, or having me montage them, really create that fact that the entire dungeon is coming at them, and it makes level 1 a lot more interesting. Now, we've been trying to come up with some better rules, because I think the chase rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide are not great, even though they do suggest obviously not using like regular style combat, because it just doesn't really work. The combat is great for like set piece action scenes, but once you delve into anything else, then I think you need to use some other system, whether that's a skill challenge or the chase rules that exist, I suppose, which are like you can use a action and your movement. More than likely, you're doing the dash action because you're running, And once you do a certain number of dash actions, depending on your con modifier, then you have to start making like con checks for exhaustion, which basically means it's only constitution matters in a chase sequence, which is kind of realistic, I guess. But I'm trying to come up with a way to make a chase a little more dynamic and interesting. And something I recently had an inspiration of is that my players really responded well to the custom tables that I made for the Neverwinter attack sequence, however many sessions that was ago, when the Black Armada attacked Neverwinter and the party showed up, and I made two separate kind of just mini D4 complication tables to simulate an ongoing chaotic battle around them. And every round, somebody had to roll on that table, and then that was a thing that affected everybody as kind of like a layer action. So I'm thinking, well, here I am trying to come up with like a chase sequence and make it more dynamic. Could I just do something like that? Could I just come up with a chase complications table? I mean, chase complications exist, right? They're in the book. The problem is the only two tables that exist are either urban chase complications or wilderness chase complications, and this is technically neither of those things. Because the urban is obviously you're in the middle of a city, so there's a bunch of like, merchants walking by and a pack of dogs fighting over food, a brawl in progress, beggars, guards, like none of that's going to happen here. And in wilderness, I think is more like you're in like the forest or a swamp or something. Yeah, sudden drops, a stream, ravine, or rock bed, swarms of insects, uneven ground. So the problem is I can't really use either of those. I'll have to come up with my own, which is designing your own chase tables. A chase through the sewers of Baldur's Gate to the spiderweb-filled alleys of Menzoberranzan, which the latter is actually probably the closest thing I have to what I'm trying to do here. In terms of when when does the chase complications actually come up? Occur randomly. Each participant in the chase rolls a d20 at the end of its turn. Consult the appropriate table to determine whether a complication occurs. So every participant in the chase. That's already like my players are the quarry and the Sahuagin army is the pursuers. So there's an infinite number of pursuers after them. I guess we could just have the players themselves probably make the complication roll. But if I use those rules, it looks like every time there's a player's turn, they have a 50% chance of triggering a complication. It looks like on a d20 on a 1 through 10, something happens, which is typically a saving throw or you basically lose speed, which is the least interesting thing for me to do in terms of losing speed, because if the party can't escape, it's basically game over for them. Like they have to run. So the penalties I'm more looking for would be like exhaustion or damage or some kind of debuff, although I think only poison is kind of a solid debuff that lasts and has effects on people. Like I can't really knock them prone because that really stops your movement. I guess you could turn somebody frightened. That gives them disadvantage on ability checks and attack roll. It makes somebody just frightened of the horde of Sahuagin. So those are a couple of debuffs I guess I could play around with besides just damage and exhaustion, which all those I could do. So maybe I could just do a complication table, in which case do I just do one of those like I did before where it's, hey, every round this affects everybody? Or do I come up with something like everybody has to roll, every individual player character is having to roll, in which case it has a 50% chance of triggering? I don't really think I can come up with 10 things that are meaningful and interesting, especially if I don't want a loss of speed to be a penalty. The only thing I could do with a loss of speed being a penalty is like, oh, you lose, you don't make it as far, and thus that triggers attacks. But that's functionally the same thing as doing damage to somebody, which is how that would play out. There's no real way they can be like captured here or something. I don't really have that as a thing that can happen, I suppose. Also, I'm not sure if I even want my NPCs to be triggering these. I don't want the the focus to be on the NPCs. I kind of fade them into the background a little bit. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards. Could roll once per side. Okay, like my initial thought was to roll like I did with the complications for the Neverwinter battles, which was once per round. I just don't know if that would be fun enough, but that would have to be like none of them were like nothing happens, right? Because that was how it was with the Neverwinter battle. Is the first table I made, it was like 50% chance of nothing happening, and then the next table I made, it was a 25% chance of nothing happening. I guess I could still do that here, but that would only be, which I guess, I mean, technically here it's a 50%, but this one is different because it's 50% chance of nothing happening, but that's after everybody's turn. That's a lot more chances to roll a complication. The other thing we have to come up with is what complications are there in an empty dungeon? There's not a lot I can do, which is why I was initially not even going to do this system. The biggest thing I can think of is something like the floor is unfinished. The whole thing has been excavated semi-recently, and thus there's maybe certain areas that would still be kind of under construction. So that would be the biggest thing I could use. There's, the floor is uneven, or some parts of the ceiling gets jostled and shit's fallen down, and those would all be kind of different saves and checks. There's not really a lot of activity going on. I guess there's like a meat locker thing down here. I never put numbers on this map. So maybe I could have like some ice on the floor. But that would only be for like one spot. And then what would happen? They would like slip and twist your ankle or something. Yeah, difficult terrain. Hello, Roll for Frog. Terrain difficulties would be the main thing I'd be looking at. The bad thing is I can't like knock people prone. I mean, I can, but I guess if you fall, you just end up with the Sahuagin like triggering an attack. But that's functionally how it's going to have to happen. Basically, if somebody loses speed, they fail a thing, then that's going to trigger attacks from the Sahuagin being able to hurl, spears or whatever. I don't think I ever want to have the Sahuagin catch up in melee range, because that would just kind of end the whole chase sequence, and that's not something I'm interested in doing for the purposes of this chase. The chase also, there's not really a win condition here. Instead, it is a timed condition. We actually mapped it out last Monday's crafting stream, and they have to go 700 feet to reach the door to the dungeon entrance. But even if they go 60 feet around, that's still like 12 rounds, 11 point something. And I don't think any of us want to go a 12 round chase sequence. So I think we need to cut that in half to like 5 or 6 rounds as we go along. So I'm trying to think, all right, balance wise, is that enough? You just try to figure it out, right? I feel like everything I try to get into, the players, when you're live and playing, you never want it to last as long, I guess. Everything tends to wear out its welcome, whether it's combat or whatever other event thing is going on. Very rarely does something end and I'm like, oh, I wish this ended. I wish this took a little bit longer. Now, I mean, I guess there has been precedent for that if a player uses a spell that like ends an encounter too early or something, but I could always add complications or something. Got walls could knock down a pillar. I played this adventure. My DM asked me to draw a map by hand. It was my quarantine project. Stunning map that one of my best works. Nice. So by adventure, love your thoughts on Icewind Dale campaign. It was supposed to have been lurking. Okay, cool. Are you talking about this adventure, the Call from the Deep? Are you talking about Call from the Deep, or are you talking about Ghosts of Saltmarsh? Roll for Frog, because in this campaign I am combining both of those, and we are currently technically in Ghosts of Saltmarsh mode with playing the final enemy of the Sahuagin Stronghold, which I have lots of mixed feelings on this adventure for sure. And it's going to end up taking our players a long time to make it through here, and still barely actually have seen any of the rooms. It's a very, very densely packed, way too big, crazy dungeon, and I'm trying to get them out of here as quickly as possible because they're running out of gas, and I think we're all running out a little bit of patience when it comes to this dungeon. Hence the chase. I think this is a great opportunity for a chase, though. I think pacing-wise, it's going to be awesome. We'll still have another battle before that, which will be this fight here, which we're down a player. We're not going to have Mac. And so we're going to have to force a fight here, but then very quickly the players will have to break all the prisoners out. I guess that could be another complication. I keep forgetting they're running with all these prisoners. All these prisoners also, like the whole group of them. So this would be like in the chase sequence. Oops, sorry, I forgot to put myself on Do Not Disturb. On Discord. A penalty could be that people die, like red shirts get killed from the Sahuagin chasing them. But weirdly, that's not as big of a penalty mechanically to the players. There's not like a moral rating or something, or what am I trying to say, like emotional fortitude versus just doing straight up hit point damage or something. Quick time event. I know quick time events are usually disparaged, but I think they can be used very well. But yeah, that's probably not wrong. And I think the best use of like quick time events in video games is to break up the action, right? To have a fun, exciting moment that's not combat, but that you still want to involve a bit of player activity. And I think when done well, those can be fun and memorable. And obviously they can be done very poorly, where it's just feels perfunctory to mash the buttons versus just watching the scene play out. Or if there's just too much of them, you're like, all right, seriously, just let me have control and do things. But I think that, yeah, this is a situation where like, all right, the party's had a ton of combat encounters. Now I'm saying, look, you don't have to fight these guys. You can run. And then we're just going to go into chase sequence mode. Basically, either before, during, or after this fight, depending on how soon I want to trigger things, and depending on how the party is feeling when it comes to fighting a patrol down on the second level. As the voice of half their party, given all the NPCs they've rescued, I would definitely suggest to them, let's get out of here and haul ass and run. I'm also even debating on whether or not I want to put the players in initiative order now. Because I put them in initiative order, that slows things down. It does give everybody a chance to do something, but it may give them too much time to think and slow down what should be a very fast-paced, exciting moment. So something I'm also considering is not using initiative order and simply having quarry and pursuers. And the quarry, which are the players, I keep wanting to pronounce like Corey, and Corey, they can simply, I don't know if I just want to let them dash or like, functionally, I feel like it would be better to make athletics checks when they are running. And I can say like by default, they're basically dashing, but they're making athletics checks to keep up with the amount of dashing they're doing. And maybe by failing these athletics checks, they incur exhaustion, but probably not. They probably have to like fail a number. I feel like I'm pasting like several systems together into some kind of Frankenstein's chase sequence. Or Feldman, either way, Nate. It's not too many Corys these days, is there? It's such like an 80s name. I feel like that name has kind of fallen out of favor. Yeah, there you go. Corey Hart. Wear my plate armor at night. So I can resist all the damage to my mind. All right, I gotta get back in. Lock it in. I definitely don't want to force them to suffer exhaustion too soon. I think that would not go over well, but I think it's fair once they start running and once we get into the chase sequence a little bit longer, then having to start making con saves against exhaustion, I think is fine a little bit. Are you saying kids today don't know 80s songs? Come on. The 80s were only like 20 years ago, man. Right? Uh. So chase complications table. I need to come up with one. I think to make it work, minimum, we need a D4 table that would occur every round. And if I'm not rolling initiative, instead we just say, I mean, I could roll initiative, but I think that just gives the players too many tactical options. I'm trying to figure out what the best balance for that is, I guess. Versus instead just saying, okay, you're all running. There's no bonus actions. There's no reactions. You're moving. You're dashing. You're having to make athletics checks to continue dashing. I could technically say if you want to do something else with your action, you can. But I would like literally cut them off. I don't know if there's no timer in Roll20, is there? There's no good way to like display a timer. That would be kind of a cool functionality. Roll20. I don't think there is. It's not something I don't think I've ever actually used, which is a strict timer. Like I've had it in my mind, like, all right, I need to, not let this go on too long. But here I thought it'd be pretty fun to use that, but I don't know. Guess I'll have to play it by ear on that one. I mean, I could use a timer on my screen, obviously, but a public timer would probably be the better thing to do. But I could literally just pull up like a Google window. There may be an API. That's true. I hadn't thought of that. But you think that'd be a pretty easy functionality. Like, hey, timer, go. Like one of the easiest things a computer can do, right? Track number. But I don't know. What's your opinion here? Is it worth... Do we feel like in a chase sequence, it's more interactive and exciting and interesting to put the players in initiative order and thus give them more room to breathe and possibly more options on their turn? Or is it better for the pacing and the tension and the speed and the chaos of a chase to say, all right, we're not doing initiative order. Instead, hey, you all go, you're running. You're dashing by default. If you want to do something else, let me know. You have 20 seconds to decide. And then when that's up, I'm like, all right, you, give me athletics checks. You, whatever you're doing, make a attack roll or charisma check or something. And I don't know if I should use the same DC for everything or try and change it on the fly. And then we move on to the next complication that happens as we make it a little bit more distance around. The other thing I can do besides making a chase complication table is I could instead take inspiration from the dinosaur races from Port Nine Zaru that I did and say, okay, we're going to break this sequence up into individual zones. And in every zone, we're going to have a specific scripted encounter complication take place. So instead of doing a random roll of something taking place, there's like, hey, around this bend, there's a specific thing that occurs. And then when you get past the meat locker here, there's a specific complication that occurs. And then when you cross this long hallway, there's another specific complication, and just kind of break it up between scripted things that happen. That's one idea, although I do think my players like and respect the random table of results. And I think they would enjoy that. And this, like I said, this particular dungeon design doesn't really lend itself to interesting specific things happening in like individual areas. The only one I could think of would be like the meat locker having like ice on the floor or something, but I could just technically plug that into the table and say, hey, ice is functionally not that different than just uneven terrain or difficult terrain. It's going to make a deck save and fuck up your movement. Don't roll initiative and turn on the heat. Turn on the heat. I'm going to stream cam order and ask them what they're doing, but emphasize time. So don't put them in like specific initiative, but maybe still ask the players if they want to do anything specific. The nice thing is I can literally say if you like by default you're dashing, and What I think would be more interesting though is still force players to make an athletics check, just so at least they're doing something on their turn and not just saying I dash. Because I think in the chase rules, that's the only thing that's like the action that you take. In each participant in the chase takes one action and moves on its turn. And then during the chase, a participant can freely use the dash action a number of times equal to its 3+ con modifier. So I guess you're not having to auto dash, but, well, it says participants in the chase are strongly motivated to use the dash action every round. But that's not very interesting mechanically because you're just like, all right, on my turn, I use dash. And then you move on to the next, right? Like, I feel like get them to roll the dice somehow, and that makes it more interesting and interactive. So, in the case of if somebody freezes and they're like, I don't know what to do in this situation, then that's fine because by default you can dash, which I am going to say, okay, that's an athletics check. And if you fail that, I need to come up with a... Yeah, so the thing is, in addition to the complications that can occur, which I'm leaning towards being just once a round, and plus with only 3 players, I think we'll go through the rounds pretty quick. In addition to that, you can also incur penalties because you are having to roll some kind of check on your turn, and thus the only reason you'd be rolling is if there's a chance to fail. Also, I'm putting the DC at 12. Do we think it's better to raise that DC up as we go along, or should we maintain the same? The only reason I might not raise it up is because if I want to use exhaustion as a penalty, then exhaustion will kind of do my job for me, which is, the one level gives you disadvantage on ability checks. So if you incur 1 level of exhaustion, suddenly you just made this chase sequence a hell of a lot harder. Also, if you incur 2 levels of exhaustion, that halves your speed, which should have some kind of penalty in a chase, although it says it doesn't in terms of the written rules chase sequence. Only when it reaches 5, which is your speed reduced to 0, do you actually drop out of the chase. But I would think that having your speed halved would certainly affect your ability to run in a chase as well. Otherwise, exhaustion 2 doesn't really make much of a difference there. So, seems kind of odd to me. I'm leaning towards going through... So, I think I'm still going to track rounds, but maybe just not do individual initiative. 12 means a fail probably every 3rd roll, assuming a bonus of like +5. We're doing some back of the napkin math. Let's see. You want to look what everybody's athletics checks are? Because that's what I'm leaning towards on. Forced them into... All right. Mr. Gottwald, our resident fighter, has a +11 to athletics. Basically, almost cannot fail a DC 12. Which, hey, he's built for that, right? He literally charges forward. He's a runner. This is his time to shine, and that's fine. But yeah, +11. Holy shit. Mac's not here. Savra is the wizard. Probably not as athletic. She has a +0 to athletics. So night and day difference right there. She will probably want to do something else with her action versus running. Depending on what she does, I will be willing to listen to that. My worry is that, like, her and Tor will be like, oh, I turn around and, like, fire my cantrips or abilities, which I guess I'll have to come up with, like, okay, make an attack roll, in which case they're, making their +8 or 9 or whatever it is against the Sahuagin's 12. So suddenly you've got, like, all the parties basically has +8, 9s or 11s to the thing I'm making them roll, which is a very little chance of failure. If I'm open to letting them do other things versus just running. If they want to just, like, make an attack. I guess it depends on what would an attack roll actually do to the horde of bad guys versus just running. Now, maybe they can be clever and be like, all right, well, I'm going to shoot... I'm going to shoot the ceiling and try to, like, slow them down that way. That could be something they do. Or maybe Savra will... I don't know, shatter, but shattering part of the wall could, like, splinter and slow them down, which, I feel like that's something that would happen in a chase sequence, right? Like, everybody's running, and somebody's going to turn around and try to fire off something that's going to slow the enemy down. I think that makes sense. The only thing is, I want to still have the players rolling something to do that thing, and then have there be a chance of failure. So it's interesting that you say DC 12 is a failure every third, because I'm thinking DC 12 is actually very low, although they are having to make these checks and rolls at least 5 rounds, is what I'm leaning towards. Toril has a +1 for athletics. But again, if he wants to use his tentacle arms to do something else, and obviously he can cast any one of his... I mean, Hunger of Hadar at the Horde would be a huge one. It would basically just solve all their problems for like probably a full round. And he's just casting a spell, and there's not even any check involved for that, because he's just casting it. So, you know, it's the problem with spells kind of break the chase sequence thing. But I do, you know, as a DM with a diverse party of different player abilities, don't want to force the party into just running the whole time, because I don't think that's realistic necessarily. I think players would turn around and try to do a thing. It gets complicated when they're like they have to do that instead of dashing, so they're actually not making it as far. So I could technically start getting real in the weeds of like, okay, well, now it's going to take you an additional round to make it out of there. Even though this solved your problems for this round because you didn't dash, because you literally didn't move, you know, as far as you could. I don't know how strict I want to be about that kind of thing. I didn't realize you were talking about letting them choose which ability to use. I mean, should I not? Like, it just feels more realistic that way. But like I just said, the penalty is if you're not kind of auto dashing on your turn, that means you're not making it as far. So suddenly, do we have to make, you know, more safe? I guess one of the penalties is if you're having to go longer rounds, you may have to be triggering exhaustion. Those exhaustion saves more often. So I think instead of doing my initial idea was to do if you fail any of your things, so that's you know, athletics check or whatever else you're doing, you manage to fail the thing you're trying to do, then you just take an attack from a Sahuagin Spear. It's a 1d6 plus 1 piercing damage. I think that's an average of 4 damage, which is not a lot. But that's separate from the complication. That's the thing that happens every round. And then during the complications at the beginning of the round, I think that's something that everybody would have to deal with, and could also involve damage or some kind of debuff or something that would affect everybody. So those are 2 things that can happen. I could also, after the players have gone, let the Sahuagin attack with their actual attack rolls and say, okay, well, now I'm going to start rolling some of these like ranged attacks. Although and maybe that could be an interesting penalty there. If the party didn't decide to dash, then the Sahuagin don't have disadvantage. Although they've got Blood Frenzy, and most likely the party is going to be injured. So I guess it might only be a difference between advantage or regular, because technically their spears, anything out of 20 feet is disadvantage, I think, for the spears, though. But yeah, range of 20, 60 means that it only has a max range of 60 feet. And anything more than 20 feet would have disadvantage. Blood Frenzy would cancel that and make it so it's a straight roll, but they would never have, I guess, advantage or disadvantage as long as the party is losing some hit points when they throw it. So it would just be a straight up roll. And that would actually be attack rolls against the AC, which the average, the little Sahuagin only has a +3 to hit. The only one I would hit them with is, I guess, the Sahuagin Champion, which has a +5 to hit and does 1d6 +3. I can start introducing that one maybe deeper as we go into the chase sequence, and kind of the feeling that things are getting more dangerous. As long as the penalties are applied to the Sahuagin as well, them being slowed, etc., I think the party would be able to stay ahead and use their abilities. Yeah. Now the Sahuagin would be functionally dashing. Well, that's true. I guess they're not supposed to be able to dash and use their attacks. But that's something, if the party doesn't dash, and instead they turn around and try to do their attacks or whatever, then the Sahuagin could attack anybody who didn't dash. Maybe that's something that's interesting, unless they do something like throw Hunger of Hadar. I feel like Hunger of Hadar would really fuck up a lot of the chase sequence. Because I mean, it's just putting like an infinite void of darkness right behind them, and turns everything to difficult terrain. Like, if Toril thinks of it, he could even fire off both Hungers of Hadars in 2 different rounds, and essentially I would just give them those rounds as like auto-complete, because it just seems like it breaks the... It's a great chase sequence spell. You like cast it behind you, and the... it's not even the dark problem, because Sahuagin already have dark vision. It's there's literally a void of inky blackness and tentacles, so it turns it all into heavily obscured, difficult terrain. And then the Sahuagin are also taking damage, although I'm not going to track the damage, frankly. But that would functionally almost just eliminate the need for them to have to make any of those other actions or things, I think. But they would still have to deal with the complications every round. Yeah, Tentacles Darkness. I feel like there's always, like... It's almost never the same spell, but there's always 1 or 2 spells that completely fucking vex me for the majority of the campaign. The party just keeps selecting whatever and thankfully it's never quite the same spell. It's either Leoman's Tiny Hut, or it's God, now I'm trying to think of Slow that Paul Robin used so much. And now Hunger of Hadar. I don't think any of these spells are necessarily like broken or OP or anything, but they're very, very good top tier spells. Fog Cloud in Lost Mine of Fandever, though that's because before I really knew how to run a Fog Cloud and gave them way too much power with it. But there's always like just 1 or 2 spells where I'm like sigh when the party brings it out, because I'm like, this is such a devastatingly effective spell in like all scenarios and situations that like, why wouldn't you cast it you know, all the time as much as possible? And that is Hunger of Hadar. I think is definitely the one that's here. It kind of slows the action down. It forces us to constantly look up the rules of how it works. That part annoys me, but just the fact that it does so many things. And as a warlock, which I love the warlock class, you know, he's incentivized to use it as much as possible almost every encounter with very little penalty, because you can cast you know, after every short rest, you get those slots back. So that is the one that vexes me this campaign. It is nice to spread them out. And it's nice that it's not like the same one. It's not like they're always like, oh, counterspell, everybody takes that one in every campaign, and it's always like a complete, you know, pain in the ass and disaster for me. I don't think there's ever been one particular spell in every single, like in multiple campaigns, where I'm like, oh, here we go. Now you're taking Silvery Barbs in Rhyme was a big one that Chris basically never let me crit anybody. Although he found another ability in this campaign where he prevents me from getting crits on anybody, which is the redirect. I think he replaced that with a different ability that's just a re-roll. And Toril just has straight up adamantine armor. He's immune to crit, so... Alas, the DM rarely gets a chance to actually get sexy critical hits off on anybody these days. So 5 rounds tentatively, but the rounds could be longer. So 5 rounds if the party dashes every round. But I think it gets really tricky if like some of the party dashes and others do actions, though. Because then you become, like, further ahead of people. I don't know if I want to track that. That gets complicated. I haven't decided on that one. It's like, if 2 people dash, the other person does an action, then those 2 people are now, like, a stage ahead of that other person. Maybe I could just rule it where, like, okay, well, when the Sahuagin attack, they can only possibly target the people who didn't dash that round. That would be maybe an easy way, rather than literally elongating all the rounds. Maybe if, like, every single person in the party does not dash, then I can be like, all right, well, now you're going another round. And the Sahuagin attack after everyone go. By the way, I don't know. I've seen people stream like some crafting type stuff. Shout out to Sly Flourish, I think, Mike, that does some where they show their notes, directly on the stream. I don't know if that's something you all would be interested in. I could like replace some of my blank camera windows with my notes. They're just a hot mess. But also, my notes are like a reward for Platinum patrons, so that's kind of why I haven't been doing it. But I realize if there's a lot of streams where I'm like writing things down and kind of sussing it out that's not in Roll20, you don't get to really look at what I'm looking at, so I guess I have mixed feelings about it. So I'm gonna attack after everyone takes an action, targeting anyone who didn't dash that round. So maybe, or maybe if you were unsuccessful at athletics check. What is the failure of that? Yeah, the failure of the athletics dash is that they can target you. All right, so target anyone who didn't dash that round or failed their athletics check while dashing. And then I'll have to determine how many Sahuagin are attacking and then what kind of attacks are targeting. I could use Token Fate to do that. And then maybe by round I can have a certain amount of Sahuagin attacking. And I think normally it would be disadvantage because they would be definitely more than 20 feet. But I would almost presume everybody's going to be at least slightly injured because this will come after another fight that they won't have a chance to short rest for. And then the Blood Frenzy would cancel out the disadvantage, so it would just be a straight up roll for all the ranged spear attacks. But I haven't quite determined like how many attacks. And that's something I can leave up to the moment. If I feel like the party's doing really well, I can throw more attacks at them. If they're suffering a lot, I can back up a little bit depending on what round we're in. So instead of... And then I think I'm still leaning towards... at the end of the round, starting in the third round, everyone has to start making con saves. I think I want to make it a save. I'm going to check. I feel like a save is for something that you're avoiding, not something you're trying to do. Right? I guess what would a con check be then? Like you're... I mean, I guess you could do a con check instead of an athletics check, maybe. I don't know. But I feel like a con save is more appropriate for avoiding a level of exhaustion. And the reason I want to start at round 3 is because I think that gives a maximum of 3 levels of exhaustion that I would throw at a player before they reach the end. If we go the full 5 rounds, which I think we would. I could raise that DC. I could start off at DC 10 and then go 12 and then go 14. That might be interesting. Because the players are literally getting more tired. Maybe just increase it by 1. Is increasing it by 2 a little too much? Make much of a difference. I could technically start at round 1 and go, all right, DC 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, but... Or I guess it'd be 10 to 14. But that feels a little too much. I feel like everybody can run a little bit. Even if you're holding on to combat, you're holding on to all your gear and you're running like hell for your life. Like adrenaline alone will carry you for at least 2 rounds, and only at the end of the 3rd round are you're like, all right, now I'm actually starting to suffer from exhaustion. I'm starting to get cramps. I need the IV. Not used to these conditions. So I think I'm gonna keep that rule, but not start it until the 3rd round. Anyone didn't dash that round or failed that last check while dashing. Sahuagin. Range spear is a +3 to hit, which is nothing for fucking Toril and Gottwald. Both have like an AC around 20-something. So without advantage, these ranged spear attacks are almost very much not going to hit. Maybe the champion might get a hit in if I start introducing the champion spear with a +5 to hit. D6 +1. Piercing damage. I mean, these guys are just built for this. Increased by 2 is good. You talked me into it, Nate. Especially since we're not starting till then. So that means by the time they get to the end of round 5, everyone's got to make a DC 14 con save or suffer a level of exhaustion. There's a good chance everybody might have at least one level. Although the one, well, I guess that would fuck up Gottwald though, because he makes a lot of. I was gonna say you don't actually make a lot of ability checks during combat unless you're a fucking grappler like Gottwald is. Sahuagin range spear, and then there's the Sahuagin champion spear, which is a +5 to hit and deals 1d6 plus 3 piercing damage. And it would just be, I don't know how many would attack. Maybe start off like round 1 as a max of 2 attacks. And would I target NPCs, or I think I would just hand wave it and say, yeah, they're getting hit as well. Like, I don't even think I want to roll for the various NPCs and just say, like, yeah, there's spears flying in and hitting all of them, and maybe, like, one of the Neverwinter people goes down. So maybe they start off with, like, only 2 Sahuagin throwing spears, and then every round I increase it by 1, and then maybe starting in round 3, which will also be the end of round 3, maybe I introduce a Sahuagin champion attacking, and then by the time they get to round 5, that's a lot of people coming at him. The tricky thing is going to be transitioning from the chase sequence into a combat encounter when things are this close to each other, and I don't want to just overwhelm the party in a sudden combat encounter where they're functionally like 60 feet behind the party. But hopefully they know that the party needs to like get out of here in like 2 rounds once they reach the actual gate up there. I think we're not going to quite make it that far. I think I'm going to end the session when they get up to this area in room 2. So we won't have to necessarily plan that right away, because I would love to do this finale here and then have the big falling action all in one session. And obviously I would love for us to be a full party at that point, because like I said, Raymond's not going to be here for this Friday. I think, is it next Friday, Memorial Day weekend also? We're getting to the end of May. Man. Use the NPCs to help make it look random. Yeah, I mean, I think if I introduce the NPCs being targets, then I would have to increase the number of shots people are taking. You know, one cool complication, I just realized they've got a bunch of people they're trying to rescue. So a complication could be just one of these, you know, malnourished prisoners collapses into a heap. And thus, how does the party... I have to have a functional, like, dice roll for that, though. Let's see, are there any inspirations from this? Not a pack of dogs fighting over food. Crowd blocks your way. Large obstacle blocks your way. It'd be like, that person falls down. You gotta make an athletics check to jump over them. Just assume you're like getting out of there. A beggar blocks your way. None of these involve like an ally falling though. That's cool. You can make dexterity or intimidation or athletics check to slip past the beggar. Automatically succeed if you toss the beggar a coin. The beggar counts as 5 feet of difficult terrain as you trample over them. Forced to make a sharp turn and take 24 bludgeoning damage. Yeah, so that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to have to hand wave all, which is a bummer because that was going to be the big meeting between him and Master Sliver. But because he's not here, we're going to have all that happen off screen. And instead, Mac will, in fact, that'll help, I think, jumpstart my chase ideas because Mac will have already left impatiently to go rescue Master Sliver. And by the time the party makes it up here, the big fakey thing is, it'll be like, well, wait a minute, how did Mac slip through here? And maybe I can have these guys already be like, I don't know, ready for battle, and this guy's already chasing after Mac, and have Mac just like round a corner or something, going another direction. And then by the time they make it up to here, you know, to end of the session, the beginning of the session, we'll have Mac and Master Sliver come out, you know, on the other side of the dungeon, basically. Thankfully, there's a lot of routes here, which I can take advantage of and have him appear in a completely different spot and be like, all right, I found him, we're back. Where'd you guys been, you know? But I think that will help create that tension and motivation for moving quickly because one of their party members has already left and rushed off to find their beloved ally. But that's a good one that I can add, is the chase complication. Let's see. We'll call it the Sahuagin Stronghold Chase Complications table, which I gotta finish by tomorrow. One of them will definitely be allied prisoner just trips and falls. I don't know what the thing is. That would allow you to make a lot of different kind of checks. You could make a strength check to just help them up. You could make a charisma check to like be like, get on your fucking feet, let's go. Maybe there's some kind of spells you could cast to pop them back up, but in any case, there should be something involved to get that person back on their feet. And if nobody wants to do that, then it would be the same thing as the beggar blocking the way, where it's, I don't know if I would do it 5 feet of difficult. I'm not tracking difficult. I don't understand. Are you tracking difficult terrain when it comes to a chase? I don't even see escape factors, complications. I guess we're supposed to be tracking like the individual. My whole thing is, for this chase sequence, I don't give a fuck. Like, there's no way the Sahuagin are going to formally catch up to the party, and there's no way the party is going to be able to completely escape the Sahuagin. My goal is to just keep them neck and neck until they get to the entrance. I'm creating that dynamic chase sequence just over several rounds. And it still incentivizes the players to roll well because there are multiple cascading penalties for their failures. So it's still worth having this interactivity, even though they can't actually escape completely, but they can mitigate the amount of damage and exhaustion they take by rolling well. But in other words, there's no real incentive for me to track formal distance between the two and start introducing difficult terrain and stuff. The only thing I would do is, which I mentioned, anybody who doesn't dash and does something else, or they dash but they fail the athletics check, so they just don't succeed at dashing very well, I guess. Then they're subject to being attacked by the Sahuagin horde, versus if they successfully dash, then they're staying ahead of the horde and actually staying like just out of their ranged spears coming at them. Although then it also calls into play, well, if somebody chooses not to dash on their turn, but they do something else and they succeed on that thing, then what is the reward? Because if I'm saying if they don't dash, then they get attacked, but if they did something else but did it successfully, then what do they get? I don't know. Sarver's at the rear. Can the Sahuagin even attack the party since non-living matter can't pass through her cube? Well, shit. The cube. This is me with just like a Lisa Simpson meme. I'm just like staring with my mouth open, like a 45-degree angle down. They're living spears. Fuck. I hadn't thought of that, obviously. Well, the party still needs to get out. They still need to run. She can't fit everybody in the cube. But yeah, if she's in the rear and the spears can't get through the cube, then as long as she stays... No, you're not sorry. It's a good point, because this would happen in the live stream, and I would just stare at them and go, oh, fuck. Um, if she's in the back, I could always throw guiding bolts at her. Maybe okay, maybe there's more priestesses in there. But I see what you're saying. If she's in the back, then can her cube just functionally act as a wall of force, basically? Shit. Shit. Let's cube of force again. Barrier of invisible force. Barrier centered on you, moves with you, lasts for 1 minute. Oh, that's interesting. I should be docking her fucking charges, shouldn't I? Lasts for a minute until you use an action to press the cube 6 face. The cube runs out of charges. So each time she does it only lasts for a minute. How many charges does she have? Well, that's interesting. Did you all know about this? I didn't realize that's how it worked. Till you use an action to press the cube's 6th face, which I assume turns it off. Yeah. Or the cube runs out of charges. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know it only lasted for a minute. And you had to keep turning it off. Because as far as we're all aware, and it's on me too, she's had this cube up for the entirety of their dungeon. How many minutes has they been in this dungeon? I hate to spring something on it like, oh, by the way, your cube is almost completely out of charges because you've had it on for this long and it only lasts for a minute. But that would be the easiest way to my problem. She's got number 2 on there, I believe, now. In fact, number 2 takes 2 charges. Is it constantly taking 2 charges then? Or is it 5 charges? This is damn. Does she have she's got to have the 5 one on then, right? Nothing can pass through the barrier? Oh, I think it's number 2 because it's not nothing because she's had like her zombies attack through it and I've attacked through it with living creatures. So I think it's number 2. Non-living matter can't pass through the barrier. Walls, floors, and ceilings can pass through at your discretion, which I assume includes water? Is how we've been doing it? But it's been taking 2 charges every minute that she's been having this thing up. Does it say that under this cube of force? Yeah, lasts for 1 minute. Okay, it's got to be out of fucking charges then by now. Good lord. And they're just about to have a short rest. It's got 36 charges, which is a lot, but that gives you 36 minutes of charge 1. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly? Which is the shittiest one, which is gases, wind, and fog can't pass the barrier. So you're just trying to avoid like a poison cloud or something. So it deducts some minutes, and I assume it comes back on a long rest. Uh, does it come back? Oh, there it goes. Actually, it regains 1d20 charges. So it doesn't even actually fully recharge. It can only regain like 1 charge daily at dawn. Okay. Well, that rebalances this thing quite a fucking bit. That would solve my problems. I've already probably given her way too much cube. She said charge 2 on, which means it takes 2 charges every minute, which is 36 charges divided by 2 is 18. You would technically only be able to keep that up for 18 minutes. If I'm reading that correctly. So I've already given her probably like hours of having charge 2 on there. That's on both of us, because I did not pay attention to that rule either. But I think that cube instantly is turning off when we start this session. I will warn her before we go to the session, though. It's like, hey, by the way, we forgot your cube lasts for a minute every time you click it on. And you can keep doing it, turning it on. But it keeps costing more charges for every minute. It's like a with a phone plan or something where you pay by the minutes. A sex phone call, which I don't. Do they still exist anymore with the internet and porn being a thing? Charge by the minute, or in my day it was like the what was those video game hotlines? Because again, the internet was just starting to like spin up. So instead, it was like the Nintendo. I think it was called something. Maybe it was just like Nintendo Hotline, where you could like literally call people on the phone. They were charging you just for calling them, but you could ask like experts questions about like getting stuck in Nintendo. Can you help me get this past the part in Zelda? I don't think I ever did it. I think I was too nervous and embarrassed. But God, I got stuck in a lot of different video games. I remember reading about these like hotlines, going like, "Damn, I need to call one of those." Kids today, they don't do any of that shit. Instead, you're bombarded with like games you don't even give a shit about, and it'll be like on YouTube, like, "Hey, here's all the secrets and stuff." And you're just like, ah. I remember having cereal one morning. I just tugged a fucking brain memory. And on the back of the cereal box, it had how to find one of the warp whistles in Super Mario Bros. 3. And I like dropped my fucking spoon in the cereal bowl like a dramatic clatter. I grabbed the box. I was like, holy shit. Because I had no idea. And I was like, what? This is awesome. And I was having to go to school still. But I came home that day and I was like, fuck yeah, I can warp whistle. And it was such a funny thing. It was the first time I'd seen it was pre, I guess it was mostly pre-internet at that point. Internet was like just starting to become a thing, but like there was no Google or something, and it was all just like word of mouth. It was Game Genie, and it was the back of the fucking cereal box. I'll never forget that. That's such a funny memory. All right. Anyway, yeah, I went off on a full tangent. That is going to do it. I will definitely thank you for bringing that up with the Cube of Force and for actually clarifying what the fucking rule there is, because that's obviously an important point to make, that it doesn't just last forever as an automatic wall of force that constantly moves with you, because that would be a broken item as shit. I'll come up with these chase complication tables, but I think that's what we're going to go with, is a chase complications, not putting everybody into strict initiative, but still allowing them some wiggle room if they want to do some other action. I'll have to come up with some kind of penalty and reward system where if they get their thing off, and then, the Sahuagin constantly attacking them, and hopefully we can get this chase sequence going and not have it be a big slog, and probably do maybe a shorter episode because of we're missing a player, but we'll see how it ends up panning out. All right, that is going to do it for this Thursday edition of the Crafting the Deep. As always, if you enjoy the content, please check out patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brendan, Zensider, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F., John L., Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp, Crystal, Counselor, Andrew, Dell, the Reldrin, Captain 2079, Stephanie, Pandy, Patrick, Jason, Ismail, Ahmed, Lumpy, Spuds, Sharni, David, William, Nizak, Warden, and Mike. Pandy is the name of my youngest daughter's Stuffed Animal Gold patrons, RPG Papercraft, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Deadless Lion, Sam, Jerome, Nathan, Fazagatora, Scott, Rufus, Karen, Jerry, Glenn, Marcus, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support. If you are a patron, I look forward to chatting with the DM Roundtable tonight. Otherwise, I will see you all for D&D tomorrow.